Well, joining me on this Talking Pints special is somebody, former Navy SEAL, founder of a company called Blackwater, absolute through and through Republican, friend, donor and supporter of Donald Trump. I'm joined by Erik Pints. Erik, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And welcome to Talking Pints.
Cheers.
You don't do this in America on television, do you?
I'm all for it.
I've got to ask you this question. Your sister Betsy,
Yep.
of course, who I've met, was the education boss in Trump's cabinet. 4 years the president had, and I know that coronavirus came along and messed things up. But how on earth did the Republicans manage to lose to Joe Biden last November?
I think the left flogged the COVID fear and the pandemic into something that just drove voters to misery. And, you know, the rate of death in America the last 10 years has been the same. This is a pandemic of fear, and the left used it as a political tool to bludgeon the president.
You see, since then, and look, you know, I know you're a friend and supporter of President Trump, as indeed am I. The narrative that the election was stolen, is it time they dropped all of that?
There's 300. What's not up for debate is that the Democrats used 300 different lawsuits to change how and why and when votes are counted in a number of those key counties. Whether that resulted in voter fraud remains to be seen. Still audits going on. But the fact is, why are there 300 lawsuits targeted at specific swing districts and swing counties even? You know, what did Beria say? The KGB head under Stalin? It doesn't matter who votes, it matters who counts the votes.
I know.
And that is extremely dangerous to any democracy, to any republic. Voter integrity matters, both right and left. I'm happy that the election in Virginia was just successful and tight and hard won, and hopefully it bodes well for other voting.
Well, the midterms, of course. I mean, it's fascinating. You know, we have a general election here once every 4 or 5 years, and much as we have local elections and London mayoral elections and Scottish Parliament elections, really it's once every 4 or 5 years is the big event. In America, elections are perpetual, it seems. I mean, it never really ends the process. So you've got the midterms this year.
And that's looking very, very positive for the Republicans. There's enormous momentum. The one thing where I think the total amount of votes in the swing states in the last presidential election was a total of 170,000 votes. President Trump signed a criminal justice reform allowing 17 million felons to vote again. So 1% of that 17 million was the total swing vote. But in Florida, the president tripled his margin of victory over Hillary Clinton in 2016 because DeSantis said, yes, if you're a felon, you can vote, but you still have to pay whatever past due bills you have from your time of incarceration, you know, $200, $500, whatever. So he was tight in the administrative process, and that made a difference. Did not make a difference in Georgia and Arizona and those states that the president lost.
Now, your relationship with American presidents goes way back. Your family have been a staunch Republican, staunch Christian family. And it was when George Bush was in Iraq and you set up Blackwater and you get some pretty significant security contracts, government contracts. Just for a British audience that may not know the story fully, just tell us what Blackwater was and what you were doing in Iraq.
Well, actually, I started under the Clinton administration.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I started, my father died and my wife got cancer all within a few months of each other while I was in the Navy. And I got out and I started Blackwater to stay connected to the SEAL teams. And that was 96 already.
Okay.
SEAL teams have been using private facilities like that since the 1970s, but no one had done it on an industrial scale. Because of my father's success, I was able to finance an organization like that. And I got out of the Navy and I knew nothing of government contracting, nothing of land developing. And my father was gone. But, you know, you go back to the well that, you know, I found 5 other SEALs that I'd worked with and we figured it out. And it was a training business, which grew into security and aviation support, kind of the full spectrum of support operations to the U.S. military, from the earliest recruiting side up to medevac and supply at the very end.
But the big job was after the invasion of Iraq, and that's when you got the really big contract. And I'm fascinated. You know, big firm. I know you had some big controversies, and this whole area is controversial. Firms like Blackwater, are they there to provide security, or are they almost a mercenary army?
In our case, the big contracts were providing security for the State Department, literally doing diplomatic security because they could not scale to enough qualified people to do that. And so we had a couple of thousand people doing that job, dozens of aircraft, et cetera. By any definition, even the Oxford Dictionary, it doesn't make them a mercenary. They were Americans working for the U.S. government on an overseas contingency operation for the U.S. government. So well away from mercenary. The role of military contractors in history is much more common than you think, and the Russians have certainly woken up to that. And they've deployed a hybrid Wagner force effectively in Ukraine, in the Donbass, Crimea, Syria, and throughout Africa. So the countries will turn to that again as Western militaries are proving to be very expensive, very inflexible, and not very capable at finishing the job when it comes to the Iraq or Afghanistan type insurgencies.
Yeah, we've done it. I mean, Wellington used all sorts of different armies from Hanover and elsewhere. So we've done it in the past ourselves.
Even the Hessians in the
colonies. I know.
But I'm not opposed to that. But, it speaks to the melding of private sector innovation. Look, America was founded by the Jamestown, Massachusetts Bay, and Plymouth companies listed on the London Stock Exchange. They hired private military contractors like Miles Standish and John Smith, who used to serve in the British Army. I mean, the America's flag is nothing but a repurposed East India Company flag.
Well, there's a lot of truth in that.
America's history drives directly out of the history of private military contractors.
How do you, Erik, as somebody that is a friend of Donald Trump's, you've given money to the campaign, your sister was in his cabinet, is he the right man to stay as leader of the Republican Party and movement?
I hope that he's learned his lessons from the first term before he considers running again. He never really got control of the entire national security apparatus or the whole bureaucracy writ large. And I think the election was his to lose, except that he couldn't let some little things go, and he kept saying offensive things, and he kind of lost the middle of America, the American housewife.
The kind of suburban vote.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And who's now paying 10 and 20% more for inflated goods and all the rest. And so they're realizing they have buyer's voters remorse, but being a humble servant leader that is there to serve the people is what they want. It's desperately what America needs.
So Trump needs to sort of tone it down a bit, basically.
He can be as aggressive as he can, but he can say it with a smile.
Yeah. Which in private he does.
Yeah.
That's been my frustration with him is you meet him in private at a social event. He's brilliant with people and he's funny and there's a lighter touch and he gets on the stage and he wants to punch their lights out.
Be thicker skinned.
Yeah. Maybe you're right. Well, yeah. Well, maybe he'll listen, but he is 75 and, can you teach an old dog?
Tend to set in your ways at that point. Yes.
No, it'll be very interesting to see. And Erik, tell me, we've been for the last 100 years and more, our two countries incredibly close.
Yep.
Close in terms of military alliances, shared battles, shared intelligence. We're still the biggest foreign investor in the USA. Good. And you're by far the biggest foreign investor in this country. And the concept that we're cousins in a way, that resonates here with an awful lot of people. And I still think in America, it does resonate with a significant number of people. How do you see Britain, Brexit Britain? How do you look upon us at the moment?
Well, let me say I have such an affinity for Britain that one of my sons is named after Sir Winston. So,
that's pretty cool.
I think Britain sits at an amazing inflection point, and I think it's almost like if you go back to the 1600s when Britain was not the top tier economy, but it was a peer amongst others that were challenging it. And Britain unleashed its private sector. It's what founded America. It's what went abroad with the East India Company. The natural capital hub that is here in London, the capital markets with the reach you have across the Commonwealth of Nations, with your affinity and very good expertise of your resources sector, your prior military veterans, to bring security and stability, you can easily serve the indispensable role of going abroad.
So
absolutely. Don't wait for the United States to lead all of this because clearly Washington is adrift in policy indecision. And I think the opponents of Western civilization are pushing towards more and more statism. And as I was just speaking at the Africa Energy Week conference, and they so desperately want Western investors, Western expertise, and the stability that comes from the rule of law of the Westphalian state.
Well, you sound like an advocate for Brexit Britain in every way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I get that very clearly. I want to finish with two big questions, difficult questions. Ukraine and Taiwan. Let's start with Ukraine. Extraordinary, isn't it, that the European Union has made itself almost completely dependent upon Putin for gas, which strikes me as being a ridiculous strategic thing to do. But as we know, in Belarus, right at the moment, they are literally
weaponizing migrants,
weaponizing them, pushing them over the border. Even stories today that some of the migrants could even be armed now with smoke bombs, etc. Then we have a very large number of Russian troops massed at the Ukrainian border. How big a threat is Putin to peace?
You know, the Russians pitched me to open a private military company in Russia in 2011, before they ever did Wagner. The way that they took the eastern part of Ukraine with a hybrid warfare approach is the most likely way they would try to do something again. I think those troops are there mostly as a positioning point for gas and for pipelines. I think it's going to be a cold, expensive winter in Europe because of the deficit in energy.
Yeah.
Shutting down nuclear power plants and coal. Look, it's wonderful to have a goal for zero carbon, but the hydrocarbons are going to have a big place in heating and powering the world for a long time.
I don't think that's right at all. Boris Johnson has told us that wind technology is the way forward, and we're going to be the Saudi Arabia of wind.
And it's great to hope, but it's also bad when the wind stops blowing. I mean, Texas had a calamitous disaster last spring. Texas, the energy capital of America, and wouldn't you know, a blizzard, the wind stopped blowing and the sun didn't shine, and Texas was hours away from a complete grid shutdown.
That's a bit of a warning to us, I think.
Absolutely.
And finally, China, or as Donald Trump says, China. I mean, Taiwan, strategically now so important in terms of semiconductors and even however many billions American firms spend, it's going to take years to catch up with where Taiwan are. How big a threat is Taiwan under? And what would we do? What would we do if there was a military invasion of Taiwan?
The Chinese Communist Party has certainly made it their mission to retake Taiwan. Taiwan is such an irritant to them because it is Han China, but on freedom, not under one party control. And so they have to bluster against it. They have to move against it. I would predict more of a hybrid warfare approach where they try to take some of the small islands, not the main island of Formosa, but the other islands occupied, and they will test the West and see what we do. And so the West has to be ready for some clever, unconventional responses to do that as a way to dial up the pressure and to realize that it's a pain point. Or Taiwan should load up a plane full of cash and fly to India and buy 3 nukes. Nuclear deterrence would end this equation, would end this discussion quickly.
Well, that was a pretty decisive end to Talking Pints with Erik Prince, and we thank him for coming on.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.